The day Hendricks told her to go home and rest her leg was the same day 3 people almost died because nobody in that ER listened to her. Mila Soren had been standing at the triage board for 6 minutes, watching the numbers climb. Bay 4, Bay 7, Bay 2. A 43-year-old male with crush injuries from a warehouse collapse on Route 9. A teenage girl with shrapnel embedded along her left side. The kind of pattern Mila recognized before the attending physician had even pulled back the curtain. She'd seen that pattern in the dirt outside Kandahar. She'd seen it in the back of a Humvee with no supplies and a tourniquet made from a bootlace. She knew what it meant before the X-ray came back, before anyone ran the labs. She picked up the chart. Put that down. Dr. Hendricks didn't look up from his tablet. He was a tall man, silver-haired, the kind of doctor who wore his confidence like a second coat. He had been chief of emergency medicine at Caldwell Regional for 11 years, and he had never, not once in those 11 years, been wrong about anything, at least not in his own telling of it. The girl in Bay 7 has a fragment pattern consistent with a secondary blast injury, Mila said. The imaging is going to show clean, but she's going to crash. Her pressure's dropping in a way that looks stable until it isn't. Hendricks finally looked at her. His eyes went to her leg brace first. They always did. She's been assessed, he said. Dr. Falk has it covered. Dr. Falk hasn't seen a blast injury outside of a textbook. The waiting room noise filled the silence between them. Somewhere a child was crying. A monitor beeped 3 times in quick succession. Soren. Hendricks set his tablet on the desk. You've been on since 6 this morning. Your physical therapy note said you're not supposed to be on your feet for more than 4 hours at a stretch. Go home. I'm fine. That's not a request. She stood there for a moment, the chart in her hand. Bay 7 at the end of the hall. She thought about saying what she was thinking, which was that she had kept men alive in conditions that would have made Hendricks's hands shake, that she had packed wounds in the back of an aircraft with half the instruments she needed and none of the light, that her leg brace was the result of shrapnel she'd taken while pulling a 19-year-old out of a burning vehicle. And not once had anyone told her to go home and rest. She put the chart down. She told herself she would stay close. She told herself Falk would catch it. 40 minutes later, the girl in Bay 7 coded. They got her back. Mila was already halfway down the hall when the alarm went off, already moving before the intercom called it, because she had been watching the clock in her head the whole time. She didn't say a word when she pushed through the curtain. She just started working. Falk stepped aside. He was young enough, at least, to know when to step aside, and Mila called the pressers and called the surgical consult and talked the team through the next 12 minutes with the same flat, steady voice she'd used in places that didn't have names on any map most people had ever seen. The girl survived. Hendricks found her afterward at the scrub sink. You were off the clock, he said. Yes. You're not credentialed for emergency intervention without a supervising physician present. She turned off the water, dried her hands, looked at him. She's alive, Mila said. That's not the point. It's the only point that matters. He wrote her up. A formal notice, submitted to the nursing director by end of day. Conduct outside of scope. Failure to follow direct instruction from senior medical staff. She read it in the break room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, exactly. Something older and quieter than anger. The particular exhaustion of being right and being punished for it anyway. She had felt it before. She knew what to do with it. She folded the notice in half, slid it into her jacket pocket, and went back to work. Mila Soren had not planned to become a nurse. She had planned to enlist, do her 4 years, save enough money to finish her biology degree, and figure out the rest from there. That was the plan at 19, standing in the recruiter's office in Billings, Montana, with a duffel bag that was too big for what she owned, and a very clear sense that she needed to get out of the town she had grown up in before it finished the job of making her small. The military did not make her small. It did the opposite. She cross-trained into the medical corps in her 2nd year because she was good at it in the way that some people are good at things before they know they're good at them. Instinctively, without having to think too hard about the steps. She could assess a situation faster than anyone around her. She could stay calm when calm was the only thing holding the whole scene together. She could look at a wound and understand it the way a mechanic understands an engine, not from a manual, but from having seen enough of them to know what broken sounds like. 3 tours. The last one ended in the Koringal Valley on a Tuesday afternoon that had started out quiet. She didn't talk about the Koringal Valley. She had talked about it once to a VA counselor in Missoula, and the counselor had nodded and written things in a notebook and then suggested a breathing exercise, and Mila had thanked her and not gone back. The leg had taken 14 months to get to a point where she could work again. She'd spent 8 of those months doing physical therapy in a facility outside of Denver, and the other 6 finishing her nursing degree through an online program that she completed on a laptop balanced on her knees in a rented room above a laundromat. She'd passed her boards on the first try. She'd applied to Caldwell Regional because it was the only hospital within 30 miles of her sister's place, and her sister had a new baby. And Mila was trying, in the clumsy way of people who have spent too long in places without ordinary things, to be part of ordinary life again. She had not counted on Hendricks. The write-up didn't go anywhere. The nursing director, a compact, careful woman named Pilar, who had been at Caldwell for 22 years and had seen everything at least twice, read it, read Mila's incident note, and filed both of them without comment. But Hendricks had a long memory and a talent for making his feelings felt without saying them directly. He reassigned her from the trauma bay to intake assessment. He scheduled her for weekend nights. He stopped acknowledging her in the hallway. The other nurses noticed. They were kind about it, in the oblique way people are kind when they don't want to take sides. Tamsin from overnight would leave coffee on the counter. Rodrigo would make sure she had the better assessment cart, the one with wheels that actually turned. Small things. The language of people who know someone is being treated badly but don't have the leverage to say so. Mila did her intake assessments. She noted observations that nobody acted on. She watched twice more in the following 6 weeks as patients deteriorated in ways she had flagged and been overruled on, and she wrote her concerns into the chart, each time with precise, careful language, and each time Hendricks signed off on whatever the other physician had done, and each time the outcome was worse than it needed to be. She thought about leaving. She thought about it the way you think about something you don't actually intend to do, turning it over, feeling the edges of it, setting it back down. Her sister asked one Sunday over dinner if she was okay. "I'm fine," Mila said. Her sister looked at her the way her sister always looked at her, which was with the particular expression of someone who has known you since you were 7 and is not even slightly fooled. "You look like you're waiting for something," her sister said. Mila thought about that on the drive home. She didn't know what she was waiting for. She had spent enough of her life in situations where waiting was the only reasonable thing to do. Waiting for the weather to break, waiting for the extraction window, waiting for the noise to stop so you could figure out what was still moving, that she had gotten comfortable with it. She was patient in the way that people are patient when they've had patience beaten into them by circumstance. She just kept working. The morning everything changed, Mila arrived at Caldwell at 5:47 a.m. for a 6 o'clock shift. The parking lot held more vehicles than it should have at that hour. She noticed it but didn't think much of it. Shift changes, maybe, or an overnight surge. She had her coffee and her bag and her keys, and she was thinking about the intake board and whether the new resident, Yates, had remembered to update the overnight charts the way she'd shown him. She was halfway across the lot when she heard it. The sound was low at first, a vibration more than a noise. The kind of frequency that gets into your chest before your ears have fully registered it. She stopped walking, looked up. 3 helicopters, coming in from the northwest in a formation that was not a civilian formation. She knew that before she consciously knew it, the way she knew a lot of things. By pattern, by the particular shape of it in the air. She stood in the parking lot and watched them clear the tree line. Black Hawks. She counted the rotors, counted the aircraft. Then she saw the 4th one, lower, lagging slightly behind the others, and she understood from the lag what it meant. Combat load. They were heavy. She was already moving before they touched down. The landing zone they'd apparently arranged was the hospital's secondary parking structure on the east side. She could see the ground crew waving them in. Security guards, who had no idea what they were looking at, were standing at the perimeter looking uncertain. A hospital administrator in a fleece vest was on his phone, gesturing. Mila walked to the edge of the designated area and stopped. The first Black Hawk's door opened before the rotor wash had settled. A figure in full combat gear dropped to the ground, and then another, and then 2 more, and they were moving with the clipped efficiency of people who do not stop moving in between aircraft and objective. The one in front had sergeant's stripes and the kind of face that had been outdoors in bad weather for most of its life. He scanned the crowd. His eyes moved the way trained eyes move, fast and systematic, left to right and back. Mila watched him. He pulled a paper from his vest, looked at it, looked back up. "We're looking for a nurse," he said, not loudly. He didn't need to. "Goes by the designation Lodestar." The administrator took a step forward. "Sir, I'm going to need you to explain the nature of—" "We need Lodestar," the sergeant said again. Not to the administrator, to the space in general. The crowd, nurses, orderlies, 2 residents who had wandered out, 3 security guards, stood in a loose, bewildered semicircle and said nothing. Mila had not moved. She was aware of her leg brace. She was aware of her coffee cup, which she was still holding, and which felt suddenly absurd. She was aware that the sun had come up just enough to be directly in her eyes. She took 1 step forward. "That's me," she said. The sergeant's name was Dryden. He was not a man who showed much on his face, but something shifted when she said it. A very small relaxation, like a cable that had been under tension suddenly finding the right anchor point. "Ma'am," he said. "What happened?" "Forward operating base in." He stopped, glanced at the administrator, at the security guards, at the assembled audience. "I can brief you inside." "Brief me now. How many?" A beat. Then 11. 4 critical. "We lost 2 en route." He said it the way she had heard it said before, flatly, as a fact, with the grief packed in behind the words where it couldn't slow anything down. The other 7 need surgery within the hour, or we're looking at more. 11. She did the math in her head without meaning to. What Caldwell had, what Caldwell didn't have, what she was going to need, and what she was going to have to improvise. The critical 4, blast, ballistic, or both. Blast primary, 1 ballistic secondary, 1's got a tracheal issue. He looked at her directly. Command said you'd know what to do with that. Command, she said. Colonel Reyes, he said. If you were still at this hospital, you were the one we needed, he said. Dryden stopped again. Something moved behind his eyes. He said you'd kept his whole unit alive once, with a field kit and 37 minutes, and that if you said a man was going to make it, he made it. Mila looked at the helicopters. The crew chiefs were already unloading, stretchers coming down. She set her coffee cup on the ground. Tell your people to follow my people, she said. And someone needs to tell Dr. Hendricks he's about to have the most complicated morning of his career. Hendricks was in his office when they found him. He came out still pulling on his coat, and she watched his face as he took in the scene. The stretchers, the Black Hawks, the combat uniformed soldiers standing in his ER hallway with the careful, coiled stillness of people trained not to fidget. His eyes found Mila. She was already at the first stretcher, gloves on, assessing. She did not look up. Soren, he said. What is, Bay 1 is going to need a thoracic surgeon, and I need you to get Dr. Okafor down here now, she said. Bay 2 is the tracheal injury. I'm going to need a fiber optic scope and someone who knows how to use it. Bays 3 and 4 I'm managing until we can stage them for the OR. She moved to the second stretcher without breaking rhythm. And I need you to clear the intake hall. We're going to need that space for overflow. Hendricks stood there. Who authorized? Sergeant Dryden has the authorization paperwork, she said. It came through your hospital's command structure at 0400. Someone should have woken you up. She glanced up at him, briefly. That's a conversation for later. Right now I need Okafor, and I need that scope. He stared at her. She held his gaze for 2 seconds, which was all she could afford. Then she looked back at her patient. After a moment, she heard Hendricks pick up the phone. The next 4 hours were the kind of hours that don't exist in linear time. She moved through them, the way she had learned to move through long surgeries and long firefights and long nights in places where morning was not guaranteed. By focusing on what was directly in front of her and trusting that the part of her brain that tracked everything else would speak up when it needed to. The tracheal injury was the hardest. The soldier, young, 22 maybe, from a town in Ohio she'd never been to, had a partial obstruction that had been managed in transit by his unit's medic with improvised means. And the improvised means had held up exactly as long as they needed to and were now at the end of their usefulness. Mila worked with Yates, the new resident, talking him through it with the same flat calm she used for everything. Slower, she said once. I know, Yates said. Slower than that. He slowed down. He was good. She had noticed that about him from the first week. Good hands, good instincts, bad habit of moving too fast when he was nervous. She'd been working on the second problem. The scope found what she expected. She talked Yates through the next 8 minutes, and then it was done, and the young man from Ohio was breathing on his own, and Yates let out a breath that he'd been holding for most of those 8 minutes. Good, Mila said. Go check on Bay 4. The critical 4 all made it to the OR. The other 7 were assessed, stabilized, and distributed through the hospital by 10 in the morning. And when the last stretcher was cleared from the intake hallway, Mila stood with her back against the wall and let herself have 30 seconds. just 30 seconds. She'd learned that from a surgeon in Bagram who said the body needs to know when something is finished. Give it 30 seconds. Then get up. She counted them. Then she got up. Dryden found her in the supply hall around noon, filling out the last of the intake documentation. "Colonel wants to speak with you," he said. "Tell him I'll call when I'm done with paperwork." Dryden made a sound that might have been a laugh. "He said you'd say that." She kept writing. "Then he should have called ahead." A pause. "He also said to tell you that Specialist Ames is asking for you by name. Bay 4. The one with the chest trauma. I know." She capped her pen. "Give me 10 minutes." Ames was 26 from a small town outside Baton Rouge and had been alert enough by that point to be embarrassed about crying when he saw her come in. She had seen that before too. The way it hit them when the adrenaline wore off, when they understood what had almost happened. "They told me you were the one who called it," he said. "Dr. Yates did good work," she said. "The sergeant said it was you." He looked at her. The leg brace, the hospital badge with the ordinary photo and the ordinary name. "He said the colonel sent them specifically for you." "I know. How does a colonel know a nurse at a hospital in?" He gestured vaguely at the ceiling, meaning the building, meaning this ordinary place. Mila pulled his chart, checked the numbers, made a note. "I wasn't always a nurse at a hospital," she said. He thought about that. "Lodestar," he said. She didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. "My unit's medic," he said. "Cortez." He used to talk about a forward nurse in the valley. Said she once kept a guy going for 6 hours with no blood supply, no proper kit, one working light. Said when they finally got him out, the trauma surgeon in Germany called it the most competent field work he'd ever seen on a live patient. Mila finished the chart note. "Cortez always did talk too much," she said. Ames smiled. The smile of someone who has been very scared and is now, improbably, fine. Hendricks was waiting for her outside the bay. She had known he would be. She had been tracking the weight of that conversation for the last 6 hours, the same way she tracked everything. In the background, steady, without letting it take up space she needed for other things. He looked different, not smaller exactly. But something in the architecture of his certainty had shifted. She could see it in the way he was standing, which was without the particular forward lean he usually carried, the one that said he was always halfway through telling you something. "Soren," he said. She waited. "I read your file," he said. "The full file. Not the nursing board application, the other one." She nodded once. "I didn't know," he said. "It wasn't your business to know." He absorbed that, the incident in Bay 7, the write-up. "It's filed. I'd like to, Dr. Hendricks." She kept her voice level, not unkind but level. "The write-up is filed. The girl in Bay 7 is alive. The 4 soldiers who came in this morning are in surgery and will likely be fine. I would like to go finish my documentation, and then I would like to go home and sleep for 8 hours. She looked at him. "We can have a different conversation when I'm back on shift." He nodded. He seemed to be searching for something to say that would be adequate, and finding, perhaps, for the first time, that the thing he was looking for didn't exist. She walked past him. Colonel Reyes called, that evening, when she was sitting on her sister's porch with her leg up and a beer she hadn't touched yet. His voice was the same as she remembered it. Dry, unhurried, the particular cadence of someone who had spent 20 years talking to people in bad situations and had learned that the voice itself was a tool. "I heard you gave Dryden a hard time," he said. "I gave him exactly as much of a hard time as the situation required. That's what I told the general." A pause. 11 lives, Soren. The medic in transit deserves credit. Whoever kept Ames going, that was good work. It was. I'll pass it on. Another pause, longer. I've got a position. Forward medical coordination. Stateside, mostly, with rotational deployments. Shorter. Better equipment than you had before. His voice shifted slightly. Better than what you're dealing with at that hospital, from what Dryden described. She looked at the yard. Her sister's kid had left a red plastic truck in the middle of the grass, and nobody had picked it up. I'm not done here, she said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. I figured you'd say that. I still have things to fix. The doctor, among other things. You know you don't have to fix everything you walk into. She picked up the beer, finally. It was cold. That was enough. Yeah, she said. I know. He let that sit then. The offer's there. Whenever you're ready. I know that too. After she hung up, she sat for a while in the particular stillness of an evening in late summer, when the heat is finally leaving and the air is something you can breathe without working at it. She could hear her nephew inside, his small, loud voice asking for something, and her sister answering with the patient repetition of someone who had learned that small people need to hear things more than once before they stick. She thought about Ames, about the young man from Ohio breathing on his own, about Yates, who was going to be very good someday, and who needed someone to slow him down long enough to get there. She thought about the intake board, with its numbers and the charts that piled up, and the particular specific satisfaction of knowing what a thing meant, before anyone else in the room had figured it out. She thought about Hendricks and the different conversation she owed him, which was not a comfortable conversation but was a necessary one, and which she would have without flinching because she had learned a long time ago that the conversations you owe people do not get easier for being delayed. She set the beer down, watched a firefly cross the yard, a single slow pulse of light. Tomorrow she'd go back in. The board would have new numbers. Someone would need something she knew how to give, and she would give it the way she always gave it, steadily, without ceremony, in the way of people who have never needed the room to know what they were doing in order to do it. That was enough. That had always been enough, and somewhere over the tree line, she could still hear the distant suggestion of rotor blades. Or maybe that was just the wind, or memory, or the particular sound of knowing that when it mattered most, she had been exactly where she needed to be.